what is this new president, Mohamed Morsi, going to do? What are his views on things? Let's see what the White House has said so far on this. We could put up what Obama. Oh, the president underscored that the United States will continue to support Egypt's transition to democracy and stand by the Egyptian people as they fulfill the promise of their revolution. So far, the White House seems to be more or less on board for this. I don't know what choice they really have other than to sort of change their rhetoric substantially, but we'll get into choices in a second. In terms of what's being said, there are some noises being made that Mohamed Morsi is in fact quite the extremist. He's just pretending to be the moderate. But if we listen to what he says, and we can put that up, he says that he'll maintain international charters and conventions and commitments and agreements that Egypt has signed with the world. That seems like it's taking a reasonably moderate stance from the get-go. And just looking at things in general right now, on the economic side, the Muslim Brotherhood leadership is saying that they, or rather is telling our leadership, that they're going to do more or less what we think they should do. We're concerned about their social agenda. That's a point, and that's certainly an understatement. That is a point of contention with the new leadership in Egypt. We are also concerned about the status of the three-decade-old treaty with Israel. That also transitions into the possibility that the Muslim Brotherhood could decide to normalize relations with Iran, which deteriorated after Egypt normalized relations with Israel. And then, of course, there's the broader question of the spread of Islamism, meaning that there could be more of these revolutions around the Middle East, and we could see more Islamist governments coming into power, sort of bolstered by what we've seen in Egypt. Some people are very much concerned about this. In fact, Congressman Allen West, we could put up what he said. He said that I call on President Barack Obama to cut off American foreign aid to Egypt, denounce the results of this election, repudiate the Muslim Brotherhood and all radical Islamist political entities. So he's taking the sort of nuclear option and putting it on the table right from the get-go. He clearly does not view this as anything that could be positive in any way, shape, or form. And so we have a lot of things here. We have certainly indications that the president could go in one direction, but we have a long history with the Muslim Brotherhood and its surrogates in the region that are certainly very troubling. So I want to bring in Eric Trager, the Washington Institute Ira Weiner Fellow. He's our man in Cairo, and I mean that literally because he is in Cairo at this moment via Skype. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Eric, so we've sort of laid out what some of the issues are right now on the table. What do you think? What is, at this point in time, your read as to the moderate noises that are being made by Mohamed Morsi, the newly elected president of Egypt? Could he push, at least for a time, in a somewhat moderate direction, or is this just a complete head fake to the West and to Israel?
Well, I think the moderate noises are really just noises. We have to remember who Mohamed Morsi is. For the past 5 and possibly 10 years within the Muslim Brotherhood leadership, he was the guy who was there to enforce the dogma. He was the guy who pushed out anyone who showed any doubt with the more hardline positions of the organization. So what he's saying now is trying to comfort the West and comfort about the 48% of Egyptians who did not vote for him. But sooner or later, that mask will fall off.
So he could be said to be something of a flip-flopper on Islamic extremism. I want to ask you, from the administration's perspective, so far it seems like there's a bit of cheering from behind. Do you think that there's any merit at this point to even raising the issue of discontinuing aid to Egypt based on this election, or do we really just have no choice but to sort of grin, bear it, and let this play out a little bit more?
Well, kind of both. I think the Obama administration could have done a much better job in the lead up to these elections, saying what it expected from Egypt before a new president was announced. In other words, they should have said before the election that we expect Christians to be respected, that we expect the rights of women to be upheld, that we expect the treaty to be upheld. We said it after the fact, almost threatening a new president, which was really a bad tact. As far as the aid is concerned, though, I think the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood means that aid will have to be considered. Well, first of all, we don't necessarily want aid going to an army that may soon fall under the Muslim Brotherhood's direction. And secondly, the Muslim Brotherhood is probably going to be focused domestically. And the one opportunity that we'll have to work with them, and I think it's a very small opportunity, I don't mean to overstate it, is to redirect military aid towards economic aid. That is something that the Brotherhood has said, or some Brotherhood members have said they're open to, but I think it's very likely that the structure of our aid to Egypt will change. It may completely go away.
Hey, Eric, this is Amy here. Thanks for joining us live from Egypt. I don't know what time it is there, if it's very late, very early, or who knows. But you were there with the throngs and throngs of folks, and we saw the images yesterday that were really extraordinary. But as you mentioned, Morsi won a rather narrow election, 51.7% of the vote. I saw Reuters reports that even mixed in those crowds in Tahrir Square were a lot of skeptics. What was your sense when you were there among the Egyptians? We saw the flags, we saw the cheering, but was there more of a mixed response?
Well, what was so interesting about being in the square yesterday was the mood before the announcement and the mood after the announcement. Before the announcement, people were saying, quite frankly, that they were prepared to die. They believed that Shafiq, that's the military's preferred candidate, would be elected and named the next president, and that as a result, there would be a confrontation with security forces. And they were saying, quite frankly, we were prepared to die. Islamists were marching in the square with cloths that were intended to symbolize shrouds. Right after the announcement, of course, people cheered Allahu Akbar and got down and started praying. But, you know, that contrast suggests to me that had the outcome gone the other way, the Brotherhood and its supporters would not have accepted it. So let's not assume, and I don't think you are assuming, that because the Brotherhood played by democratic rules in an election that it won, that it's a democratic entity. It's very clear to me that had the democratic election gone the other way, they would have rejected it and there would have been violence.
Oh, so that's good. It's good for me to ask you now, Buck. Does that mean we should consider the fact that maybe the military gave this election to the Muslim Brotherhood?
Gave it to them? You mean you think that maybe these weren't actually the results on the ground?
Look, I'm suggesting that one could look at the situation and go, if violence is the possible outcome, should the Muslim Brotherhood not win this? Look, we being the military, are still in charge. We hold all the cards. Give them the symbolic presidency, placate the people. We'll move on and run this country behind the scenes.
Well, at least they're smart enough. Usually, a lot of the time in this region of the world, in rigged elections, you know, the preferred candidate gets 99.7% of the vote or something like that. So this was a squeaker. So it would seem to be easier to at least believe that maybe, you know, if things are close, it's easier to push them to one side or the other. I frankly don't know. I just have broader concerns about what this means for the region. We've talked a lot here about Syria. That's going to be a long, protracted fight, but the Muslim Brotherhood is the most organized political entity there. In a revolution, it would seem that in the aftermath, just as it has happened in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood would take control of Syria. And oh, by the way, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, there are other Sunni Arab states that still have their own internal problems, and they have Islamists in their midst. And this could lead to sort of a burgeoning Islamist presence across the region.